Good morning and welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a moment as we wait for people to join us. All right, well, we can get started here. Good morning and welcome everyone. My name is Megan Blackmore and I'm a learning coordinator with the Invasive Species Council of BC. ISCBC is a collaborative-based organization committed to reducing the spread and impacts of non-native species within BC. I'm joining you today from Kamloops, where I'm grateful to live, work, and play on the unceded traditional territory of the Secwepemc. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, co-hosted by the Integrated Vegetation Management Association of British Columbia and the ISCBC, entitled Managing Knotweed Adjacent to Water Under the City of Abbotsford Pesticide Use Permit. This webinar is approved in BC and Alberta for 1 continuing education credit towards pesticide applicator certification. To qualify for this credit, you must participate in the entire webinar as well as the quiz at the end. The quiz link will be added in the chat box immediately following Doug's presentation, and you'll be reminded again to take it and make sure it's complete. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the ISCBC's Learning Center later this month. ISCBC and IVMA members will have free access to the recording, and everyone will have the opportunity to earn their CEC credits if they watch the entire recording and complete the quiz. The link to ISCBC's Learning Center will be in the chat box. If you have any questions about the credits, you can reach out to Gwen Trimpton at IVMA. Now, I'm sure that you're all Zoom experts by now, but if you are experiencing any technical problems with Zoom, please use the chat box and tech support, which is Nadine here. She will see if she can assist you and help you out with that. Also, everyone is muted, so you should only be able to hear myself and the presenters. In Zoom, if you have the option to select, speaker view or gallery view at the top of your screen. We recommend that you use speaker view. If you have any questions during Doug's presentation, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Doug will be taking time at the end of the presentation to answer questions, time permitting. If you see your preferred question already in the Q&A box, you can click the thumbs up button to upvote it, and the question will be bumped up the list. If we run out of time to address all of the questions, we can share the questions and answers by email at a later date. At this point, I am pleased to give a warm welcome and introduction to Gwen Trimpton, the Executive Director of the Integrated Vegetation Management Association. Please enjoy the webinar, and over to you, Gwen.
Thank you, Megan. So just an introduction to the IVMA. The IVMA is a recognized organization dedicated to the responsible practice of vegetation throughout the province. Our membership represents diverse industries, including forestry, gas and electric utilities, railways and highways, and invasive plant management. The IVMA is the credit coordinator for the Ministry of Environment Continuing Education Program for the recertification of pesticide applicators for the forestry, industrial vegetation, including noxious weeds, and aerial categories. You must be a member of the IVMA for us to track your credits. Information on this program, as well as how to become a member of the IVMA, can be found on our website at ivma.com. We plan to enhance the opportunities for obtaining credits by holding webinars. This webinar qualifies for 1 credit in British Columbia only. It's not available for credits in Alberta. You must provide us with your pesticide applicator certificate number when you registered for this webinar, and stay for the entire presentation and answer the quiz at the end. You don't need to pass the quiz, but you need to put some answers in order to obtain your credit. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our webinar speaker, Doug Drinkwater. Doug was born in Nelson and grew up in Smithers. He left a career in mineral exploration and silviculture to form Drinkwater Environmental Services, DES, with Bob Drinkwater in 2011. Since then, DES has been involved in vegetation management, including invasive plant management throughout BC. In 2021, Doug took over as general manager of DES, which is the primary contractor for the Fraser Valley Invasive Species Society. Doug is currently studying integrated pest management at the University of the Fraser Valley while managing DES operations. Welcome, Doug Drinkwater.
Thank you. Thanks, Gwen. It is. I do appreciate the opportunity to have this talk here. It's just. Excuse me. I'll start my screen share here. What have I done? All right. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Looks good, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you. So, yes, a little land acknowledgement. We do work and play within the traditional territories of the Stolo people. Additionally, beyond that, Drinkwater Environmental Services, and I'll just say DES for simplicity's sake. We're lucky enough to employ primarily Stolo staff, and I'd just like to take a second to say that it is a distinct honor and privilege to work with some really wonderful and unique people coming from that community. So beyond acknowledging the land, I'd just like to take a second to say thank you to those guys for giving me the opportunity to work with them. A little bit about me, like Gwen had mentioned there, I started in this industry at about 2011, and only recently have moved up to a managerial role. There's a picture there on the left there is a young, excited guy working out of a pickup truck. And that is a stem injector strapped on my hips. So if anything, I do have a lot of experience working with knotweed and potentially working out of an office in a truck. So I don't know if my facial expression is a result of being stuck behind a desk more, but it appears by this photo that I seem to enjoy being out in the field a little bit more than this desk stuff, but we'll work on that here. So I am an undergraduate at the University of Fraser Valley. I don't have a university degree. I don't have a professional designation. So throughout this talk, I'm going to be giving my story of my experience as a boots on the ground contractor, my experience in working with clients to sort of evaluate and provide solutions and consult with clients to best meet their needs. And I just like to sort of preference a lot of what I'm saying, where I give recommendations and say things should happen this way. What I'm really saying is that as a manager of a company who's had the sort of the privilege to work in some really unique contracts and some really exciting work, this is how I would address a situation as a manager when it arises. So I'll talk a lot at the beginning about the relationship with the client and how you sort of are going to bring them on board and how that relationship evolves into accomplishing all of their goals and hopefully removing all of the knotweed from the lands that they manage. Again, as I mentioned, Drinkwater Environmental Services is a product of sort of my father and I. He was a provincial weed expert out of Prince George and had a long and relatively distinguished career. And in retiring, I think just sort of had a love and passion for this industry and decided to continue working in the private sector. And it made an opportunity for me to sort of come on board and get me involved in what I've come to really enjoy and found to be quite a rewarding career. As I mentioned, we've got some phenomenal staff in the Stolo people. We've worked with some really great regional weed committees, from the Northwest Invasive Plant Council to now the Fraser Valley Invasive Species Society. I'll mention a few times about the involvement of regional weed committees. Through my experience, I've come to be a tremendous fan of working with regional weed committees. I think they're an invaluable resource. We've had the opportunity to have them as clients quite regularly for us, but I think if you're working in a company that manages invasive plants, you should definitely have some sort of relationship with your invasive weed, your regional weed committee. Even if it isn't a contract relationship, I think that the involvement of these weed committees is critical to achieving the goals in our industry. So pesticide use permits. If you Google pesticide use permits, there is a bunch of sort of varied stuff coming up, and I've picked this one as an example because it comes up on the top of a Google search. This is the North Vancouver's pesticide use permit application. North Vancouver has a ban on the cosmetic use of pesticides. So if you want to use a pesticide in North Vancouver that's outside of it's a non-Schedule 2 pesticide, you have to go through this process. And I just thought I'd take a second and just sort of illustrate that this is not at all what we're talking about. The language of a pesticide use permit is not exclusive. So just for the purposes of this talk, we're definitely talking about a relationship with the provincial government. And yeah. So what is a pesticide use permit really quickly? If you go to the government's website, they define a pesticide use permit as an authorization to sell pesticides, apply pesticides to public or private land, to apply pesticides as a service, or for specific industrial uses on water. So pesticide use permits are a pretty broad piece of permitting. And no pesticide use permit is going to be the same. So I'm going to be talking specifically about permits to allow the treatment of knotweed adjacent to water, and specifically the permit that was given to Ken Dykstra with the City of Abbotsford. So why would someone need a PUP to treat knotweed adjacent to water? I think anybody with a pesticide applicator's ticket should be a little bit familiar with this big piece of legislation I put up here. And that's not even it. That's not even the part that covers pesticide use permits. But this is the part that really comes into question with treating adjacent to water. And without reading all of this, because there's certain caveats here and there, just to surmise that we're working with invasive plants, we basically are limited to or required to keep a 10-meter buffer zone or a pesticide-free zone from any body of water. I think the definition of body water is a subject that could kind of deserve talk in its own regard, and I don't think I'll get into that in that point. But the workaround in that is when working with an invasive species using glyphosate, we can reduce that pesticide-free zone to 1 meter. So that basically is the issue. We'll find ourselves then often with plants within that 1 meter mark that require management, and we need to find a way to achieve those goals. So a little bit about knotweed. I'll try to be a little bit brief here. I could probably talk for days about knotweed, and I'm sure a lot of you know a lot about it. Knotweed is a plant that loves water. It's a voracious grower. It has a thick, dense canopy. It tends to outshade and outcompete any other surrounding vegetation. Its root structure is not really sustainable enough to maintain a lot of bank stability, so it can cause a lot of silting. It can damage fish spawning grounds. Similarly as well, enjoying water, and without that root structure, it tends to propagate downstreams and across lakes. It's quite harmful to infrastructure. It's capable of growing through concrete, pushing up sewer pipes, going through culverts. It all around is a pretty nasty plant, and it accounts for quite a lot of the work that we do. I've been working with this species a long time, and I just maybe take a quick second in terms of the management. I've heard a lot of people talking about using some extreme rates of Roundup applications. I've heard people say 30%, I've heard people say 50%, and I just like to sort of plug my own anecdotal experience into that and sort of say I think it's possible to get really effective control on knotweed without using those extreme rates and really focusing on timing. The best results I've seen from managing knotweed come from treatments that go on late in the year, trying to time your treatments around that bloom, just before bloom, just after bloom. You get really, really effective results, and there's no need to sort of worry about going off label or doing anything that really puts too many chemicals out into the environment. So if I could just sort of stress that a little bit, is we don't need to be hitting this hard and frequently and early. It's a patient sort of finesse kill, and I think with a little experience you can get a lot of results quite easily. So one of the problems with knotweed being adjacent to water so frequently is we're able to treat it, we're able to remove it over a period of number of years, but eventually that knotweed population that's existing sort of adjacent to water is going to find itself into a bit of a maintenance program. We're never necessarily going to be able to remove it. There are some techniques that we can use to sort of lower those populations that are adjacent to water. Techniques such as knock and spray, which I am a bit of a fan of. That kind of includes just we use like a blade or even just the wand of your backpack to give a little knock to the stem and have it bend over without breaking. And then those plant materials that are then outside of the pesticide-free zone can be treated, ensuring that they don't fall back into the pesticide-free zone. I imagine with enough work, eventually you might find some success there, but really we are finding ourselves limited to how we can control those sites into ongoing programs. So the question is then, if we were looking at managing those plants within the PSC, who can apply for a PUP? And the reality is a PUP is not something for a contractor. It's not something for a homeowner or a developer. PUPs are really limited to land managers. When I say land managers, I'm talking specifically about managers such as the provincial government, forestry companies, railways, public utilities, municipalities such as the City of Abbotsford and regional district. So it's not exclusive to any one of those, and there's been a lot of sort of pioneering work going on in the ministry, and they've really laid out some exceptional guidelines, and I think are capable of walking any land manager through the application process. So it's not really my purpose of the talk to talk about that. I'm going to focus more on sort of the relationship between the contractor and the client, and how we can best serve our clients to provide the best service possible. So why is it important for a contractor to understand PUPs? So land managers, they can vary in size. Obviously, land managers like the provincial government are going to be running their own weed programs. They're going to have RP bios and PAGs and specialists who really know the ins and outs of the species that they're working with. A lot of cities, regional district runs its own weed program. But that said, there are a lot of small land managers out there. There's First Nations and railway companies who really don't have an invasive plant department. They don't have a specialist on there, and a lot of the times, not just in land managers, but with any client, you sort of are answering the phone, and you're really the first line of contact with some people and trying to explain what issue they have is, and laying out some options for them on how they can deal with it. So I think it's pretty important to provide the best service to your clients, to really have a full understanding of all the options that are available to them, and the ins and outs of the regulations involved in it. And this is going to come at sort of a repeating theme. How can we be the best contractors and provide the best service for our client? So that said, when should the discussion of a PUP begin with a client? Typically, when a client reaches out to you and they're not running their own weed program, they don't have the specialist of their own, there's usually a pretty long conversation that begins with them sort of saying, so-and-so told me I've got this plant, or I've had an environmental assessment and they said this is an issue. And it tends to be quite a long conversation as you sort of explain what it is. And during this conversation, I think it's pretty important to manage the expectations of your client. To them, you have to realize that the plant is something that's very simple. If you have a dandelion on your lawn, you just stick a shovel in the ground, you pull it out, it's gone. A lot of these people don't realize that species like knotweed, and not just knotweed, like knapweed or something that has a significant seed bank is going to take quite a lot of time and effort and an ongoing program to manage. So it's pretty important to manage those expectations. And if they can identify at that time that they have knotweed and that knotweed is adjacent to water, it's good to sort of explain to them that you possibly could be entering into an ongoing sort of maintenance relationship with that plant. But that calls to sort of lead yourself to an initial site assessment where you get a good idea of what plants are there, maybe not totally thorough, but enough that you can go back and work with them and have a little bit of back and forth to write an invasive plant management plan or knotweed management plan. And at that time, you really should be letting them know that yes, you do have some sort of plants that are adjacent to water. This is going to be a difficulty. We do have techniques such as knock and spray that can be available to help work with that. But really, I don't think that's the time to really be discussing a PUP with them. I think once your management plan is in place and it's been agreed upon, you're going to have an opportunity to work on that land. And there's a few things I think are really important, and it's to identify all of those populations, to ensure access to those populations, get some sort of management going on there. It's important to remember that a PUP is not permanent. So when a PUP is in place, there's a bit of a countdown. And it's pretty critical then to know everything that needs to be done and ensure that that work can get done before the land manager goes ahead and makes its application for a PUP. It's also important to sort of acknowledge the fact that the land manager has certain responsibilities that the contractor doesn't. So you really want to be confident that you can provide them everything that they're going to need, and everything can go smoothly once they decide to pull the trigger. So how do you acquire a pesticide use permit for a client? You really don't. It's not a contractor's place to be acquiring a pesticide use permit for a client. I think at this point, if you haven't engaged your regional weed committee and you've gotten to the point where you're beginning to discuss sort of options that the land manager can take on themselves to be able to hire somebody to eventually perhaps remove these populations, or at least move them outside of the water, that at that point it would be nice to have your regional weed committee aware of the work that's going on. So this decision here really needs to be a well-informed decision that's taken on by your land manager. You or your company can be the ones for a contractor to implement at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, really, as treatment contractors, we're a blunt tool. We're just boots on the ground, and we definitely don't bear the same sort of legal responsibility for the land that the land managers does. So we can inform and we can advise, we can implement, but we can't make that decision for them. But it is an important decision for them, so it is important for us to be able to give them as much information as possible in helping to make that decision. This comes actually off of the IVMA website. It's a little flow chart. I think it's absolutely brilliant. This is the kind of resource that you would want to provide to your client. But in reality, once you've discussed the options and if they've decided that they want to move forward in the application process, it's time to turn it over to the government and let them do the hard work with the land manager in acquiring that permit. In the case of the City of Abbotsford, and what I thought worked really well was at that point, the Fraser Valley invasive species was brought on, and Kathy there did the public consultation and really worked with the city to make sure that happened, and I think that worked out really, really well. So implementing a PUP, this is where I guess it gets interesting for us. And really, I talked a lot about the initial sort of relationship with the land manager, but that might not exist. It's quite possible that PUP has already been acquired and you've been contacted and reached out and asked to work within this PUP. And there are a few things I'd like to know before bidding on a contract like that. And that really is, it's not as straightforward as just going out there and killing the plants. As I mentioned, every PUP is like a snowflake. There's no two that are alike, and everyone's going to set out a number of sort of hoops that you have to jump through. I think it's pretty important in doing this work that you sort of evaluate those hoops and maybe just set the bar a little bit higher. For example, you may be asked to, as the City of Abbotsford was, to notify all property owners within 30 meters of the application. We bumped that number up to 50 meters, and just to sort of err on the side of caution. Records are absolutely critical. Document everything. That land manager is going to have to report out on that PUP at the end of the season. There also possibly might have to make available at the drop of a hat any details going on about those treatments to any public that sort of approaches them. So just really being anal retentive. TES, we've really had a privilege to take part in a number of complex and sensitive projects in the past, and really being anything short of perfect could damage a company's ability to work in these sensitive environments. Further, a company's actions in implementing a PUP could really damage public opinion if you're not careful. It could limit MOE's willingness to give out PUPs, and really this is a small industry, and you really don't want to be tarnishing your company's name by being sort of lackadaisical about these applications. So the City of Abbotsford is honestly a really great client. The city acknowledges the existence of these plant species within their municipality. They take a really responsible approach to managing them. Quite often you find yourself telling a client like you have to do this or you should do this, but with the City of Abbotsford, they've really sort of taken the bull by the horns and done everything within their power to mitigate the problem of invasive plants, and specifically knotweed within their municipality. So DES, we kind of started working within the City of Abbotsford around 2015. Excuse me, I got a bit of a cold here. But we got a contract with the Fraser Valley Regional District to do a roadside survey of knotweed populations in the City of Abbotsford, which was some work that I'm quite proud of. I was really happy with the results of that. And after that, we found ourselves working with different departments within the city to work on those knotweed populations, and that's sort of evolved, and we've worked with different people within the city until we began working with Ken Dykstra, who is a phenomenal guy to work with. It's really been a pleasure to work with somebody who's enthusiastic to learn about plants, who's enthusiastic about getting the work done, and who's willing to learn and put the time and effort into doing it right. So at the point working with Ken, we managed to sort of funnel a lot of the work from the different departments through one person who then would get that work to us, and has since then started working more with the Fraser Valley Invasive Species Society and bringing them on as a consultant. So after working on these sites for a number of years, it was sort of discovered that we definitely had some populations that were adjacent to water, and the city wanted to move forward and make the application for the PUP. So with the assistance of Kathy with the Fraser Valley Invasive Species Society, they went and got themselves a PUP. I'm not going to read every little caveat of the PUP, but there's a few things. It does identify that this will allow us to treat with specifically Roundup Weather Pro. This is an interesting one. At the time Roundup Weather Pro was new on the market, it was super available. Boy, it's hard. I bought a pallet last year, and if I could find a pallet this year, I would snap it up. But it's getting harder and harder to find that product, and it's just sort of one of those pieces of experience that you might not consider. But with the Roundup Weather Pro with a specific PCP number, we are allowed to treat the area between the water's edge and the high water mark, and the area between the high water mark and the 1 meter mark above the high water. So that really puts us right into that pesticide-free zone to accomplish the goals that we want. Aside from that, we're not allowed to get any herbicide in the water. That's a pretty big one and should go without saying. Maybe in the future, as legislation changes, we can be a bit more sort of relaxed about that, but I think it's a pretty responsible approach to take. A few other things, at least 24 hours prior to the application, it needs to be pre-posted. We have, I think a few slides ago, I did show the postcard that Kathy had made for us. So we have to notify every landowner. Another sort of big time crunch, and again, the Fraser Valley Invasive Species Society and the city were super good at getting us addresses and stuff, but in notifying landowners, it doesn't count if you just go to the house and hand them a postcard. Those people might be renting that property. Really, you have to inform the landowner, which can require a little bit of digging and a little bit of driving around. And to be honest with you, the time I spent pre-posting and delivering postcards and talking to people at their front door or finding out who actually owns a property, that took far longer than the actual treatments. So if you find yourself in a position to bid for one of these jobs, it's not just your treatment time. You can almost take your treatment time and triple it to allow for those sort of requirements. There's going to be an annual report, as I had mentioned, and as well, you're going to need to be able to provide that information to the client so that they can report to anybody who has any questions. They do sort of limit us to an application rate to a certain amount of area. With the City of Abbotsford's PUP, we were allowed to use a foliar spray, stem injection, or wipe-on, as long as the wipe-on had a handle on it. They were a bit concerned about sprayer safety, so no handheld or gloved wipe-on were permitted. And just the last highlighted thing I said is contact with standing or moving water, herbicide contact with standing or moving water at any time is prohibited. So the numbers, in 2021, those volumes are concentrated glyphosate, concentrated Roundup. Just under 12 liters went under a foliar application. We did 575 stem injections and just a little bit of wipe-on. In 2022, significantly less herbicide went out. We did have a few sites that were reported in the middle of the project. So we did have some areas added on, but really those smaller numbers are a reflection of the success that we saw in the first year. I mean, really, we're talking about moving knotweed 1 meter, and I've kind of bragged a little bit about being pretty good at killing knotweed. So if I can't move knotweed 1 meter in a season or two, then I'm definitely in the wrong industry. So that year we did no wipe-ons, about 50 stem injections, and for the most part we were able to do the work with a foliar application, as most of the plants had moved away from the water's edge, and we could be a little bit more lax knowing that we weren't going to have any herbicide contacting the water. So takeaways and things that could have been done differently. I talked a little bit about identifying all knotweed populations and ensuring that there's access. This population, just to sort of have a look at it, there is not, I don't know, the picture doesn't really show it, but there's a significant amount of Himalayan blackberry behind that stand, and that water is a little too deep, and the mud on the bottom is not solid. So a lot of the time, and a lot of the pictures that I've shown here have been from like Horn Creek, where I was able to put on a set of hip waders and just walk up the creek. In this situation, you know, I'm not really going to be able to walk through that, and perhaps like a boat or something. This is not a site that we've been treating, but just one I've used to sort of articulate the point. So that's kind of why I said it's really important to identify all those sites. With a bit of a time limit on your PUP, if you've only got 3 years to treat, there could be nothing worse than finding a site on year 3 at the end of year 3 and having it identified as falling within the area that the PUP is covering and not having an opportunity to treat it. And the access thing, there is at least one site. It does have some private property around it, so I chose not to share a slide of that one. But there is one site that we've been aware of for the 2 years, and even last year we still weren't able to get access to that 1 meter area adjacent to the water. I am confident that next year we've pushed it far enough from the back that we will be able to get in there and move it away from the water and achieve our goals. But it's certainly not a stress that I would like to. I would have liked to have gotten that population to a point where we could have fully managed it within the 3 years and had 3 shots at it instead of 1. That said, I think we will do okay. I am pretty confident that we will get that one site treated. But yeah, just a little takeaway if you are going to be consulting with a client. I am talking a little bit fast. I think I'm going a bit faster than I practice this, but we're just going to wind down the clock here with some before and afters. This is a little I don't know if people can see my cursor here, but this is a little overview of Fish Trap Creek Park inside the city of Abbotsford. It's quite a pretty little park, but this site here on the left, you can see sort of the treatment area from the satellite photo is actually a small island on sort of a portion of the creek that's kind of turned into a small lake or a swamp. It is boat access only. The city in 2021 would have provided us a boat. In 2022, we were able to use our own boat for it. So the next slide will be some before and afters of that site, and then after that, the site to the right there, the red stars. So this is in the middle of the island, looking back towards the path. The left side is 2021, the right side is 2022. And you can really see after one treatment, you know, I think in terms of that, we've accomplished our goals in getting it outside of the high water mark. And that one can then just sort of move into sort of traditional treatment. This is just 180 degrees facing the opposite direction. Again, there's a large stand of knotweed at the end that, although there is a few little stems in the middle of the island there, we've you know, gotten a really good kill on that. And on the other side of the park, not the perfect perspective, but this is sort of mixed blackberry and mixed knotweed. You know, a beautifully complex site, and the kind of stuff that I really enjoy working on. So we had been working on this site for a number of years before the PUP was in place. So you can kind of tell that we do have some other weeds, some blackberry coming in there, and on the left-hand side, you can tell that there has been sort of ongoing management. But with the PUP, we were able to actually get in and get those plants that were adjacent to water, and it's another site that I think we've been successful in removing. you know, this is the sort of areas that are really, I think, important to protect, and I think sort of why it's important to have land managers aware of this tool that's available to them. You know, it would be a real shame to see this park, this little pond here, turn into just a wall of knotweed, which would obscure that beautiful view there. Potter Road, I haven't put a map or anything because this is adjacent to somebody's private property, and I'm sure they don't want the world knowing that they have knotweed. Again, left is 2021, right is 2022. This site, there was actually no plants found in 2022. This was a one treatment, one shot, one kill. So again, if I can lean towards those, you can see the leaves are beginning to senesce at the time of the first treatment. You know, those late season treatments with really a low level of glyphosate applied throughout the entire plant. I believe there was some stem injection done on this site as well, where there was a little bit of risk. And I think we had some tarps out. Unfortunately, a bunch of Himalayan balsam has moved in there, but given the choice, I have no problem removing some Himalayan balsam for somebody rather than some knotweed. Now, number 3 road, again, 2021 on the left, 2022 on the right, and unfortunately, somewhere in 2020, early 2022, I dropped a truck battery on my phone, so the quality of my pictures was somewhat diminished because I had to go buy a cheap prepaid phone. But you can see on the left there, you know, a large stand of knotweed that's overhanging a ditch that the city is responsible for. You know, for this site, we had to coordinate access to the private property owner. The house at times has been rented, at times it's been vacant, so it's been a little bit of phone conversation and tracking people down to ensure that we have sort of legal access to get to this knotweed from behind. It's a little bit hard to see, but there is still some knotweed in around that tree that's going to require some ongoing work. But you know, another site that I'm pretty happy with the success from. This is the opposite side of the driveway there. Again, there was a large stand, and that's just been reduced down to just a few small stems. Gardner Park, the parks on this job is great. I love working within parks. So we're going to be looking at the site here at the bottom right. There's actually a little bit of a path, and down there, and in the initial treatment in 2021, the area was just a little bit flooded. I think, you know, the City of Abbotsford has been having tons of fun with flooded water. So that is actually a fairly significant little patch of knotweed. And on my initial site inspection, I thought we had nailed this one as well. You can see the dead stands there, but in coming back to do the second pass, we did notice that we had a few sort of stragglers popping up, but those are treated in the nice and shiny in the picture. And Marion Road. In 2021, they were actually shooting a movie on this site, and took a little bit of negotiating on my part to let them have me access to the site. This is a good example of our pre-post signs. Those signs go up prior to treatment. We write on there the date and the time of the treatment, and then when we actually perform the treatment, we're able to just add the date there, so we don't need to put a treatment sign up there. It's a one-shot deal, and then after 24, and again, I'd stretch it a little bit more, maybe 48, 72 hours, we can go back and pick up that sign. Again, we've got some yellow leaves on this. The left 2 pictures are 2021, and the right 2 are 2022. We do have some regrowth there, and I suspect there's been some mowing going on as there's some smaller plants there, but we are seeing some pretty good success there, and it's one that I'm pretty confident by the end of this project we will have gotten out of that pesticide-free zone. This is another one that required some significant work with the landowner to acquire access. This is a small farm on, actually not small farm, it's quite a large farm on Angus Campbell Road. The landowner was awesome. You know, opened all the gates. I think a truck actually got stuck there, and he had a tractor come in and pull our truck out of the mud for us. But you know, this is another site where we've seen just phenomenal success, and you know, I think, you know, really we'll be able to again accomplish those goals quite easily. And the number 4 site, that is the Bob. That's the Bob Drinkwater there in the right, still at 70 something years old, still getting out there putting a backpack on. So I think we work in a pretty great industry where if that's what kind of inspires you, then why stop doing what you love? But yeah, behind this giant patch of knotweed on the left in 2021, there is actually a small body of water. And again, really happy with those results. I think we've moved that knotweed away from the water's edge, and we can continue working with it outside of the pesticide-free zone. So a little bit faster than I expected, but that's what I've got. So questions, I guess.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Doug, for the detailed presentation. That was really great. We'll begin the Q&A now. We will start with the first question and work our way through until we reach about 10 a.m. As I mentioned, if there's not enough time to address all the questions, we'll answer those and send them out by email at a later time. If you see your question in the Q&A box that's already been asked, you can click the thumbs up button. It'll bring your preferred question to the top of the list. Also, the quiz is now open, and just a reminder to everyone again that you must complete the quiz to gain your continuing education credit. So there'll be a link in the chat. You can click on that to complete that quiz. And just a note, if you're from Alberta, it will ask for your date of birth. So we can continue on to the Q&A now. A second here.
Okay, so what techniques would you use to avoid inadvertently getting herbicide in the water when you're doing treatments from a boat or with waders? I wouldn't do a treatment from a boat, to be honest with you. In a situation where it would be boat access, I would try to get the plants from the other side, and that might involve a little bit of brushing to get down to the water's edge, and treating any plants that are outside of the pesticide-free zone so that you could get in there with some stem injectors. With waders against the edge of the water, you're generally going to be stem injecting. If you can't get your foot on the ground, you're going to need to be just stop screen sharing. There we go. Yeah, so if you're able to get a foot on the ground, that's the way to do it. But I certainly wouldn't be doing a foliar application. Those leaves hang out over the water and they drip quite a lot. So it's a matter of working with it. You may have to cut a few stems to be able to get yourself a place to sort of squat on the edge of the water and the edge of the population. But I certainly wouldn't recommend doing any treatments from a boat. Experience with Habitat Aqua. We have a bunch of experience with Habitat Aqua. One of those contracts that I'm really proud of, and it's a really exciting one that I talk about working with some sensitive sites and some complex sites. We've had the honor and privilege of being a treatment contractor for Ducks Unlimited and the provincial government, doing the Spartina work with Habitat Aqua. We're using it under the emergency registration. So we've been working with Habitat Aqua for a number of years. And actually, I guess I forgot to mention during my talk, a conversation we had with the Ministry of Environment, where there was a certain amount of clarification that went on regarding treatment adjacent to water on private property, and it was identified to us through that communication, or confirmed in our understanding in that communication, that the IPMA Act, it doesn't apply to landowners, and there is a pretty big distinction between land managers and landowners. So if you're a private property owner, you basically just have to adhere to the label of the pesticide, and the two labels off the top of my head that would allow then the treatment to edge of water would be glyphosate and Habitat. I'm not confident about Powerline, but it is possible. But I know definitely Habitat Aqua, the Imazapyr, they allow treatment up to the water's edge. So it's a great product. I'm hoping to get to play with Imazapyr a little bit more. I'm really excited about it. Everything I've done with it has just turned out absolutely fantastic. So kind of excited about that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds for that. So with the success removing knotweed, do you have any experience in revegetation after knotweed and stories that you can share? Yes and no. I certainly would like to do a lot more sort of rehabilitation work. A lot of the times when we treat knotweed, we'll come in with just sort of a general seed mix, like a perennial wild rye or something like that. I don't know that grass or monocot's going to really outcompete knotweed, but at least in terms of optics, it certainly works a lot better. I've got a very exciting site out at Tuyetons Road here that I'm going to try to do sort of a rehab at the same time as removing, which is a little bit tricky with using herbicides that are going to drip all over. But I think, like, really we are leaving a pretty significant scar when we remove knotweed populations, and it is an opportunity for invasive species and pioneering species to come in there. So I think it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. You don't want to come in there and do landscaping and replanting until that knotweed population is gone. If you're not adjacent to water, there is a lot of non-target damage that can go on. Oops. That can go on. So you don't want to go and spend a bunch of money on a bunch of white cedars or something like that that's going to have a lot of non-target damage. Similarly, I think it's probably a pretty good idea to drop a little bit of grass down. So it's a little bit of give and take. Until that population is gone, you have to acknowledge the fact that there's going to be a little bit of runoff coming from the leaves. Let's see. Are you doing any post-treatment planting? Yeah, so I did sort of mention that we don't do a lot. Well, we do some planting, but it's not sort of traditionally we've been mostly involved in the removal of the species. I think that's something that each site is going to be kind of specific depending on where it is. But again, I'd sort of stress that unless you're willing to lose those plants or put those plants at a little bit of risk, I would make sure that population is gone before you do start planting. Additionally, gone for a while, because those plants could come back and waste. You don't want to waste your time in planting expensive landscape plants.
Just a note that I can see that Bob Drinkwater has his hand up. I can allow him to talk.
Yeah, please do. He's going to have something to say, I'm sure, about planting.
All right, you're just muted, Bob. You'll have to unmute.
Yeah, I'm just going to mention that one of our clients and people we work very closely with are the Fraser Valley Watershed Coalition. And if we have a really critical issue in terms of replanting, we're really working with them very closely, and they'll come in and look after that. They're specialists at that.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, we did. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So are other applicators finding Weather Pro is difficult to find in the marketplace? For instance, Bauer moved all IVMA uses from WeatherMax Weather Pro. Would they require Monsanto? It seems odd they would limit supply in that way. Yeah, I have reached out. If anybody can find some Weather Pro, let me know, because I do need it for at least another year and a half. I'm not sure really what's gone on there. I've been told by some people that it's no longer being produced. I've been told perhaps I could buy it in a 50-gallon drum, but yeah, I don't necessarily know why the reasons it's not available. Just that it is really typical. My foliar application rates with glyphosate products. Well, it's 8 liters per hectare at 400 liters per hectare. I mix at I like 2%. 3% is pretty good. Depending on if well, I don't think you're really depending on a rush. I think what's really critical in managing knotweed is covering every surface of the plant with knotweed and even the stems. There is a waxy cuticle on the top of the leaf and a lot of stomata on the bottom side of the leaf. So I think a lot of people kind of don't consider applying to the bottom of the leaf, but with a good surfactant, you can get it to stick on there. And really, you're trying to get as much herbicide to translocate into those roots. I mean, knotweed is a large plant above ground, but the reality of it is the majority of it's below ground. And, going on those high rates, you have a potential of getting a bit of a top kill and perhaps it not translocating fully. So when I talk about finesse, like a light amount of herbicide applied to the entirety of the plant and the time that it needs to sort of to translocate to the roots. And I think perhaps, and this is anecdotal. I'm an underground. I don't know for sure, but I think that with the lower rates, we do get better translocation, maybe a slower kill, but I don't think that's a bad thing with knotweed. Any comments on the public consultation process in Abbotsford? Did this work raise any significant public concerns? I wasn't involved in the public consultation period. Kathy Ma was, and I'm sure grateful for that, because I don't need people calling me up and telling me how I'm poisoning people's pets and stuff. I guess I would have to turn that question over to Kathy or perhaps Ken. And you can find her if you go to the FEISS's website, or additionally, if you go to the City of Abbotsford's website, they do have a whole website devoted to this project. They have an opportunity for you to ask questions, contacts, and everything. They've done a phenomenal job, and I'm really impressed with that. So check out their website as well, and that's where I'd point you for those questions. So Dr. Raj Prasad. Oh. Knowing Drinkwater and Shrimpton is Colleen's, give my regards to, yeah. Okay, I'm not sure that's a question. I don't know if that's any relation to Dr. Renee Prasad. Okay, Becky, glyphosate has a short residual. In similar projects that I've worked on, the large stands are quickly depleted, but there are small emergent stems for many years. The province typically remains 20 years post no weed found for knotweed before declaring a site eradicated. How long is the Abbotsford knotweed eradication project planned to continue? I mean, I don't think you could stamp a done date on knotweed. You know, I've heard stories of guys having root balls that they've taken around from talks to talk for, you know, up to a decade or something, and leaving it out on the back tailgate of their truck and having it rain one night and finding a small shoot come out there. So that's a difficult question. You know, I think once it's sort of, you're not finding any stems, I don't think it should come off a list for some time. And you know, really, as a contractor, like I said, I am a blunt instrument. I can make recommendations, but that decision also is going to involve the client a lot. I think we're going to be treating knotweed for the City of Abbotsford for some time to come. We've found quite a few new sites last season, and I anticipate new sites coming on there. So I think the discussion for when we are going to be able to wrap this project up is not one that's really happened yet. Yeah, I think that there certainly should be some monitoring. I think the thing you really want to avoid there is putting all this time and effort and getting, you know, pesticide use permits and paying contractors and spending tens of thousands of dollars to work on these sites, and then to walk away and have them come back is basically a waste of money. So I imagine in your plan you can work with your client and sort of establish that, you know, you're looking at like a 3 to 5 year window to remove the population, at least as it's seen on the surface, and then, you know, monitoring should go on probably annually for another 2 or 3 years, and then perhaps switching to semi-annually, even every 5 years. But I certainly wouldn't take my eyes off of a knotweed site for a significant amount of time. And I think 20 years sounds about right. But you might not need to be on that site every year for 20 years, you know. But for the last 10 years, it might be just a site visit every 2 to 5 years or something like that. What rate and amount of Weather Pro do you use for stem injection? 5 milliliters. The PUP, let me just double check that. They do limit us to, yeah, 5 milliliters per stem, undiluted into the stem. We use the blue JK knotweed stem injectors, and I believe they're calibrated. Oh, I should know this off the top of my head. Either 3 to 5. I think they're calibrated to 5 milliliters. They do get calibrated every season and regularly throughout the season. They don't get a phenomenal amount of use outside of the PUP program, but I don't think that it needs all 5. I think when you're actually, 5 milliliters of undiluted glyphosate is a phenomenal amount of herbicide. And I think there's sort of this mindset that because you're injecting it directly into the stem, that it's not getting out into the environment, but it is going to translocate through the plant, and it's going to take some time. As Becky notices, it does persist a little bit in the vegetative material in the soil. So, you know, I tend to avoid wherever possible stem injection because of the volume of herbicide that's going in there and the time. I mean, it's significantly more expensive for a client to hire you to do stem injection. It takes a lot of time. And although it is really effective on the stems that you do inject, there is a certain amount of human error in there. And I don't know how many people have actually crawled through a bush to make their way to the bottom of a knotweed stand and started hitting every sort of stem there. But it is pretty confusing. And even with a marker taped to your stem injector, it's pretty easy to miss stems. So although effective when you actually do hit the plants, the human error side does kind of lower the efficacy of it. So some controversy on use of glyphosate on its use near aquatics. Adjunctives being toxic to fish, fish and frogs, yeah, in particular. I am a big fan of a lot of amphibians, and I know a lot of surfactants can, they literally kind of breathe through their skins, and I know a lot of surfactants can impact that. And again, I'm an undergrad, so I'm just talking out of experience here. We do work in some species at risk areas as well. We have some experience working with Oregon forest snail and different frogs. I think it's really important then that you acknowledge the fact that there is a possibility of targeting some terrestrial or damaging some terrestrial species, and our eyes are always open for those species. If it is sort of identified as a habitat for a significant habitat for a terrestrial species, we will not use the surfactant or the adjective. In terms of being toxic to fish, I can say with a fair amount of confidence that we are not getting any herbicide in the water, outside of those contracts like Spartina, where we were actually doing aquatic treatments. So as I said, we're lucky in the contracts that we get, and we're able to work in some really sort of complex and sensitive sites. So we really work hard to do our diligence and make sure that we're not going to have that kind of non-target damage. We'll use things like tarp shielding to ensure that no herbicides hit the water. We spray in very low winds. And if there is an issue of having it come in contact, we'll go with something like stem injection. But it doesn't hurt to not treat a site. That site's not going somewhere. And we've last year we brought in a biologist to do some work with the Oregon forest snail, and he was able to go in and evaluate those populations pre and post treatments, and sort of ensure right off that we weren't doing any sort of harm to species at risk at that point. So it's just a matter of due diligence, and the question really has to be asked is the small amount of herbicide that we're going to use to remove this plant population going to be more harmful than allowing an invasive species to destroy the ecosystem that population is dependent on. And I think ultimately we have to move forward in removing the invasive species, and we just have to do so in a responsible and careful manner. Why not use another glyphosate product for foliar and save the Weather Pro for stem injection? It is actually a requirement in the PUP that all treatments are done with Weather Pro, and the specific PCP number. I've had lots of salesmen try to tell me that this is the same product. And Becky, Habitat Aqua is now recommended for product for controls. Yeah, Becky's a great resource if you have questions about Habitat Aqua and Imazapyr. Becky Brown, the provincial EDRR coordinator, I think is her title. A super person to work with, very, very informative. I'll say her name. I imagine she probably doesn't want to get super bogged down with a bunch of inquiries, but another brilliant resource, and someone who I'm quite excited, happy, and proud to work with. So yeah, we go through the Weather Pro because it was identified in the PUP as the only product available to us to use. And again, it is, I believe, the only product that has stem injection on the label. And I do realize we sort of lost stem injection for a while there. So I'm hoping somebody in the realm of higher ups can kind of address that problem. And I think we were actually involved a little bit in consultation with Monsanto to get that back onto the yes. Clear Lake Solutions uses this herbicide, Imazapyr, I guess. Clear Lake Solutions, a little plug for them. They are doing aquatic work, I believe, mostly on golf courses. They are super guys to work with, really together if you are looking. And while we're talking about it, Clear Lake guys, if you are on this talk, there's a new product coming to the market. It is called, we just tried it. It's put out by CPRO.
We're just coming up on 10 o'clock now, so we'll just continue on to getting the quiz, and we can put out these answers afterwards. I think that's okay.
Clear Lake guys, send me an email. I'll put you in touch with somebody who's got a better product for what you're doing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Doug, for your presentation, and especially sharing all your expertise here. It's really appreciated. So I would thank you everyone on behalf of ISCVC and Gwen at IVMA for attending this webinar. We appreciate all of you who have attended. We will be sending out a link to a short survey to all participants, and we encourage you to please fill it out so we can get your feedback and ideas for the future webinars. Quick reminder, you do need to make sure that you finish that quiz so that you can get your continuing education credits. There's a link in the chat for you to access that, and that's how you'll be able to gain your credits. If you're not already a member of IVMA or ISCVC, please view the links that will also be in the chat. And again, thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.